is Cat's Diamond Painting. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back if you've joined me here before. I am here today to go through my tips for how to deal with static in your diamond painting drills. So what is it? What do I mean by static in your drills? So I've got an example here of some drills that I have pulled out of my stash. And can you see those drills that are seemingly defying gravity and sticking right up there against the sides of the bag? That is static. It's when your drills cling together and they do not want to play ball. You cannot neatly tip them into a tray or a pot because they're clinging to the edges of what they're in and sticking to each other, and it all gets rather annoying. I had to get very used to dealing with static drills because one of my favourite diamond painting shops went through a stage where they had a bit of a manufacturing glitch. A lot of people will know what I'm talking about, and most of their drills were coming out with a lot of static, so it needed a lot of effort sometimes to kit up because you had to work through all that static. So what causes it? Why are some drills prone to static and sometimes they're absolutely fine and they slide out of their bag like a dream? Predominantly, it tends to be to do with dryness. So dryness causes static and moisture combats it. And that's a bit of a spoiler of a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. What causes the dryness is various. It can be climate related. So some people who live in very, very dry climates report dealing with this kind of issue a lot more often. It's not only climate related though, because this is certainly not a dry climate where I live in the UK, and I have it right here in these bags. So often it can be to do with the manufacturing process, something going a little bit wrong somewhere along the way, or storage. So these bags you'll see are all in Ziploc bags rather than the heat sealed bags. Ziploc bags, for whatever reason, tend to be a little bit more prone to having static. It's absolutely not exclusive to them because I've had plenty of static in the heat sealed bags before. But these ones just tend to be a little bit worse, so it can be to do with that. One other thing to mention at this point is sometimes with static drills, as well as seeing them cling to the edges of the bag, you'll also see them cling together and look clumped. So this is not to be confused with when your drills are a bit oily or greasy from residue from manufacturing and clumped together because of that. Static drills can look clumped, but when you touch them with your finger, they'll break apart. And that doesn't happen if they're actually dirty and you need to clean them. All of the tips that I'm going to go through today are things that I have learned from various diamond painting groups on Facebook, just either through browsing or when I've been specifically looking for tips on static. So I'm not claiming whatsoever that anything I'm going to go through here is particularly original. If you've already got a routine that works really well for you on handling static drills, this may not be the video for you, but sometimes people are coming up against it for the first time, or they maybe know one or two things to do for static, but not the rest, and the drills that they're dealing with are particularly resistant. So that's why I thought it would be helpful to go through all of this. I'll also say as well that I regularly do kitting up videos, and when I'm doing kitting up videos and dealing with static at that time, then obviously I'll talk about what I'm doing. So if you watch those videos regularly, again, there may not be a huge amount new for you here. You're very welcome to stick around anyway, but I'm just giving you a heads up about the kinds of things that I'm going to be covering today. A lot of these tips as well need to be layered. So when you're dealing with really bad static, you might find you need to do 2 or 3 of these tips to get the drills workable. So just it's about having them all there as tools, trying them out, seeing what works for you, and then being able to just crack on with kitting up and working on your diamond painting. Okay, let's get started. The first step for me when I am tackling a kitting up and I can see that there is static in the bags is that I go through and take all of the bags and I take a little pin like this, just any kind of normal push pin. Obviously that won't focus. And I poke a hole through the bag. So I'm just going to do that with one of these now. I'm just going to push that through in a couple of places, make small holes. So now I've poked these holes, I'm going to go put this in my freezer. I normally do this 1 or 2 days before I'm kitting up. Not that it needs that long, but I'm not sure that the amount of time I have in this video is going to be long enough, but I'm going to give it a go. So I'm going to pop this into the freezer and then explain to you why I'm doing that. So if you remember what I was saying earlier, static is primarily caused by dryness. So for whatever reason, out of manufacturing issues or storage or climate or whatever, static is in these bags because everything's got too dry. And I learned this for myself the hard way when I was doing my Temu unboxing that I put up recently. And I used a vacuum cleaner that I'd got to clear up spilled drills. And it sucked them all up great and added a ton of static in because, of course, through the process of vacuuming, it had dried them out. So it really does come down to dryness. Now, putting those in the freezer with holes in the bag means that that moist air of the freezer is going to start to get into the bag. And that can really help to take, if not all the static away, to take the worst of it away. So I'll get that bag out again at the end of the video and see if it's had time to do anything yet. Another thing I'm going to say at this point before I go any further is when you are dealing with static and you're kitting up into some sort of storage container, try not to overfill the pots that you're using. So if you can leave a good gap at the top, like maybe take it to this point, then a lot of these tips need space to work. So that will help once the drills are in the pot. Normally what happens when you're dealing with static is you have to take some measures to actually get the drills out of the bag that they came in into your storage pot, but you may not be able to deal with all of it, so then you're going to do something else to help it settle once they're in the pot, and that's what you need the space for. Okay, on with tip number 1. So the first way of combating static using moisture is a very simple one. I am going to open up this bag where you can see that the drills are dancing around nicely and clinging to the edges. Move these to the side. And I am going to blow in it. So I'm opening the bag, I'm going to put my mouth around the outside and I'm going to sort of huff into it. Do that a couple of times and then close it up and shake it round. So let me do that now. Okay. Can see the condensation in there. I'm closing it up and shaking them around and we'll see if that does anything to help with the static. It can take a few goes, but because I picked a small bag, it's actually got them playing ball much quicker. You see how those are straight away just moving around the bag a little bit better. So with this, what I'm literally just doing is adding the moisture of my breath into the bag, shaking it around, and that is taking the edge of dryness off the off the drills. It does get a little bit difficult if you are doing a big old kit to have to do this into most colours. If you're like me, you'll end up being a little bit lightheaded, but it is a tip that works well and one to layer in. Tip number 2, I'm going to try a different bag this time. This one is not so bad, but there is a little bit of clinging. You can just see there. So this is one that I personally use quite a lot. It's another way of combating with moisture, and I'm going to use rubbing alcohol. So I got this on Amazon. I think it only cost me something like £2 for this small bottle, and it's going to last me absolutely years. I also learned that it's because it's a first aid antiseptic, it's quite helpful to have in the house because we came home from a walk once and my son had a tick on him, so we were able to treat it with this. So all I'm going to do with this is take a cotton bud, dip it in, tap off the excess because I don't want it to be too wet. I'm actually going to wait a moment so that it's not at its wettest. Rubbing alcohol is going to evaporate really, really quickly because of the nature of what it is. And then I am just going to swirl it around in my bag of drills. So what this is doing is adding moisture of a kind that will evaporate very quickly and not cause the drills to get wet and stay wet. And this can be really, really effective. Some people also do this with just regular water. I haven't tried that because I wonder how easy it would be to get the water back out. As I've said, this will evaporate quickly. Water, I don't know. So because this was fresh and quite wet, they do look a little clumped for it. I will use this tip without refilling it, without redunking it for a while. It will feel dry and yet it will still have an effect on the drills. So in subsequent bags, it will probably look like it has a much better effect. But if I shake those around a bit more, again, you can see they're just moving around a little bit better in the bag. Another thing that people use for the same principle is anti-static spray, Static Guard. I got this one as well. For some reason, I tend to stick with the rubbing alcohol. I'm not sure why, but they basically do the same job. These are just different sides of the same coin. So pick your poison, choose one of these, use a cotton bud to dip it in, and that is a good way of dealing with static. These are also good for cleaning down other things. So if your tray has picked up some static or indeed some dirt, you can rub that down with these as well, or inside your pots, anything that you think might be causing the issue. Tip number 3 is one I don't actually have one to show you here, but I'll explain why. So this is just something that I've heard people mentioning for people who live in areas that just typically have a very dry climate, and that is to invest in a small little tabletop humidifier. I do not have a humidifier. I have absolutely no need of it here in the UK. I have a dehumidifier that I use at certain points of the year when the house is prone to getting a little bit damp, and I certainly don't want to add any more moisture into it in general. But if you do live in a very dry climate and you know that that could be a significant part of your issue, a little tabletop humidifier I've heard is really good. Running that next to you while you're kitting up, it can really help with your drills. Okay, so those are the main ways that you can use moisture to combat static. I'm now going to go over a few other non-moisture ways. So, tip number 4. This is one that people will probably have heard of because it's very commonly shared, and that is to take a tumble dryer sheet. I know some people don't have tumble dryers. I don't use these in my tumble dryer. I bought these expressly for this purpose. It cost me something like £1.50, £2 for what will be a lifetime supply. And they do work quite well for moderate static. So all I'm going to do with this is cut off a smallish square, and I will pop that into a bag of staticky drills. Shake it all around once I've got this Ziploc back up. This doesn't want to do up. Make sure that all of the drills have some contact with it, and that will start to lift the static from the drills. This is one that's actually done a pretty good job straight away. You can see there again, they are moving around pretty well now, apart from a few stragglers. But dryer sheets is one that can just work a bit slower. It's one where if you're dealing with static in general in a kit, you might decide to just pop a little square of this into your pots as you're kitting up, and you'll find it continues to work as they're in the pot. The reason it works is simply because these dryer sheets are part of their role is to eliminate static in the tumble dryer. Along a similar theme as this, you can buy those scent booster beads. I think Lenore Unstoppables is a big brand, but you can also pick up own brand versions, places like Aldi for much less. They're a little more controversial. Some people swear by them. Some people say there's nothing in them to make it work. Because they're not specifically designed to combat static. But I have it on good authority from a friend that they contain moisture, so they will slowly help over time if you leave them in the bags. My next tip I've lost count, I'll put it on the screen, is tinfoil. So I tend to just have a little pot near me with some bits of this ready to use. You can see I'm a bit low at the moment, because I find this one of the really helpful ones because it's so easy. Everyone's got some tin foil or aluminium foil or whatever you call it. So again, just tear it off into tiny little bits, roll them up and put them in those bags. Oop. And it's another one where at first you're probably not going to see it do anything much. But over time, this really works. So it's a really good one for just popping one in your pots. And then by the time you get around to opening those pots, you'll find they're much better. I'm going to restock my little pot while I'm talking about it. So there is actually science behind this one. Well, as there is with most of them, because combating dryness with moisture is basically science too, right? So basically, it's just about the fact that metal is a conductor. So the electric charge that's built up in the drills is sort of collected, if you like, by the metal. It gathers the electric charge up and transfers it away. So there's science. It works. It works. It really does. So I highly recommend this one. It's one that I didn't know about until recently. I personally find this a little bit more effective than the dryer sheets. The dryer sheets sometimes have a bit more of an instant effect, but then maybe don't do too much more for me. Whereas the tin foil does nothing at first, but then when I come back to it, usually the drills are then fine. And that said, again, this one is already looking a lot better. Okay, the other thing that I was recommended on a kit that I was really struggling with is an anti-static wristband. Now you can pick these up on Amazon, again, really cheap. I think it cost me £3 or £4. And these are generally computing equipment, I believe. So people use these to ground themselves when they're doing work in like computer, I don't know, motherboards, whatever it's called. So you basically put your wristband on, it's all connected up. You clip this end to something metal. Now this was the bit that I personally struggled with, was finding something that was the right thing to clip it to ground it. But you find something like a nail or just something metal and unpainted, clip that, and then just dip your finger into the pot and you should find that the static reduces. Now I had mixed results with this. For your sort of run-of-the-mill, seeing the drills just dancing all around the bag, not wanting to behave, I didn't find that it did too much. However, I worked on this one kit where I was having the clumping issue I mentioned before. So the drills weren't actually stuck together, but they were clumping together because of static. So every time that I poured them out into a tray, I had to use my fingers to just separate them out. It wasn't a huge pain, like they weren't really stuck together, but every time I had to do it because I'd put them back in the pot and they'd clump back together. And this did resolve that. So that was the time that this really came into its own for me and helped a lot. So it's maybe not as helpful as the rest, although that could be down to use rarer. Like I say, I struggled to work out what to ground it with, but it was a useful bit of kit for the money and it did really help on that one project that I was working on. So those are my tips, and what I'm going to do now is go get those other drills out of the freezer and see if anything's happened to them yet. Okay, you can see that that is fogged up, so I'm going to shake them around, try and get that moisture that's got in through those holes all around the drills. And I would say there's a little bit of improvement already. I definitely would recommend leaving them in the freezer a little bit longer than that, but it's a helpful starting point. As I said, the way I tend to use the freezer trick is to just do it to all of my drills a couple of days before I'm going to kit up. or a day or a few hours, whatever notice you have. And then it just takes the edge off some of the static. Mind you, I've had some kits it's worked brilliantly on. I had one that I remember kitting up last year that I'd seen so many people commenting that the static was really bad in. I saw it was really bad when I opened up the kit, popped them all in the freezer, and they were absolutely like a dream to kit up when I got them out of the freezer again. So it can work well. I sometimes find that some tricks work better than others at different times, and I wonder if that's just to do with the different causes of the static. Maybe some things target different causes better than others. You'd need someone who's much more up on the science of it than me to properly answer that. But that's why I like to have a range of things, because like I say, the key thing is if your static's really bad, you might find that no one of these tips seems to do that much. But if you do a couple of them, if you have them in the freezer and then you blow some warm air into them and shake all that around, and then maybe if it's still really bad, you bring in your rubbing alcohol, and then once you've done that, you stick in a little thing of tin foil and then leave them to settle for a bit, you should find that you have a much better experience by the time you come to work on your painting. Because of course it's not just about the pain of kitting up and getting the bags into your storage pots, it's also about not wanting to have to fight them every single time that you get a particular colour out while you're working on the painting. So I hope that you found this helpful. As I said at the start, there was nothing revolutionary here. A lot of people might be watching this thinking, well, I knew all that already, but I'm hoping that it will have been helpful for some of you out there who maybe haven't come across any or some of these tips before. Just so you've got these in your back pocket for next time that you come across a kit that has a few issues with static. Hopefully you won't have too many anyway, but it happens to all of us at times. So let me know in the comments if you have any other tips that really work for you that you think would be good to share here. Let's make this video a one-size-fits-all, all of the static tips that everyone can think of all in one place. And I would be really curious, of course, if there are any others that I haven't tried yet, to see if any of those work well for me. All of the ones I've showed you today, though, are good because they're inexpensive. They use either household ingredients, you know what I mean, household items that you'd have around anyway, or things that you can pick up very cheaply on Amazon. So I like that, because once you've bought your kit, no one wants to have to spend a lot more money to just deal with the kit, do they? Thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.